So importantly, as you heard already in the fireside chat, I identify pretty strongly as a me searcher. What that means is I study me. I'm interested in how people like me, people similar to me, how multiracial families, as you see here, how we function differently than maybe the monoracial families. Also this question of visible versus invisible identities. As I mentioned, it wasn't until my gap years that I really decided to pursue a PhD in psychology. So all of your paths may take very different directions at different times. But importantly for me and my job security, at least at this point, this is a picture of a graph from the US Census that's projecting or predicting how our US population is going to look racially and ethnically up to the year 2050. In psychology, there's a big theory known as social identity theory. How this sort of functions is my sense of self is created based on my in group versus my out group. So who I am versus who I am not. Right at Duke, we have a big rivalry with UNC Chapel Hill. So I am Duke, I am not UNC, would be an example of that in group and out group. But I've always argued in my work that this is really too simple of a way to think about ourselves. And my work is really pushing researchers and scholars across disciplines to acknowledge the fact that we all have multiple identities or this multiplicity of belonging. We're not just your race or your gender or your age, whatever the case may be, but you have lots of parts of yourselves that make it as who that you are. And a lot of research sadly doesn't incorporate the fact that we have multiple identities that might actually be shifting how we're feeling in different contexts. So first, a big question that our lab focuses on is identity denial and identity questioning. So identity denial would be this direct threat to you and your sense of belonging, saying you are not Black to be in this student group, for example. Identity questioning is a little more what we would consider a microaggression. It's not as direct of a threat, but it's something that I've been asked a lot growing up. Are you sure your dad's your dad? So these are the types of questions our lab focuses on a lot across a lot of different populations. And I'll show you how this works particularly for multiracial and multicultural groups today. There's a lot of past work in psychology that has argued that the more minority you look, the more you tend to identify strongly with that group. We ran that same paradigm here with biracial people and found that that skin tone correlation or association wasn't actually true for biracial people. So how they physically look doesn't actually necessarily match to how much they claim or how strongly they feel connected to their racial or ethnic identity. So this is one of the first pieces of evidence in psychology to show that we use this more monoracial framework in thinking about race, which excludes a lot of people who are multiracial and being fully understood. But as I mentioned before, we have very little research looking at the health consequences from this identity denial experience, especially for biracial populations. What we ended up finding, and this is still one of the only published data points to date, is that both of our Asian Americans and biracial Americans, of course, showed spikes in cortisol because it's horrible to experience that form of identity denial. But our biracial sample actually recovered faster. And what that means is their cortisol came back down to kind of their baseline levels. And at first, that might sound like a good thing. Oh, you feel normal again. But how we actually interpret this data is that this type of identity denial is so common for biracial people that their bodies have created this natural coping mechanism to actually recover from the stressor faster. How you identify versus how others may see you can definitely impact your sense of self and how it is you behave and treat people around you. So please be aware of all of those factors when you're going out in your everyday interactions. Identity saliency, or again, how active one of those identities may be in your mind, can make you feel more or less threatened, right, based on that context. And it's definitely going to shift even what colleges you maybe think you want to apply to. I remember when I toured college campuses, some of them just felt wrong to me when I stood on that campus. I felt threatened in some way, and that wasn't going to be a place for me. And finally, we know these real world cues can actually influence how we feel and act all the time, right? You might not even be aware of it, but walking into a really cold room versus a really warm room, right, can shift how it is you're feeling in any given moment. So making sure you're all giving yourself 10 seconds more time to really process how it is you're thinking about yourselves and your environment. So with that, I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes. There is no such thing as single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. I hope you all think of your multiple selves and your multiple identities as you apply to college, and good luck, everyone.